Good evening, race fans, and welcome to coverage of the Esports Racing League Premier Series Spring Season Finale live tonight from Charlotte Motor Speedway in Concord, North Carolina. I'm James Pike, the voice of Putting of Esports. As Putting of Esports brings you coverage of the ERL, alongside me in the booth, Justin Prince with Ryan Bauer punching the buttons in our virtual production trailer upstairs, and JP. Pretty straightforward and simple storyline going into tonight. We will have one champion, but more importantly, 5 drivers within 11 points, 3 drivers within 1 point. Jimmy Mullis with a tiebreaker on wins, but all 5 of Alex Bell, Mullis, Brandon McKissick, Braxton DeWeese, and Nick Olson come into tonight with a chance to win the inaugural ERL Premier Series title.
It's been a thrilling season, to say the very least, so far, James. It could be anybody's title, to say the very least, especially at this racetrack tonight. Bella's been phenomenally consistent, 8 top 10s on the campaign. Mullis consistent as well, with 8 top 10s, but having that win difference, as you mentioned. Those are the 2 drivers to watch. Everybody else behind within the range, they don't have the drop week quite factored in yet. That's got to be kept in mind as well for tonight. In other words, Bell and Mullis, the 2 drivers to watch to see who can come home with the title here at Charlotte.
You bring up another good point, Justin Prince, in that Bell and Mullis have already had their drop tabbed in. McKissick, DeWeese, and Olson have been 3 of the ever-presents in this series and will have a drop to give away here, so could make things interesting, and we'll try and get points sorted out for you as quickly as we can when we get to the end of proceedings tonight, so we can tell you who is the inaugural ERL Premier Series champion once we get through with tonight's race. 60 laps going to be coming your way momentarily from Charlotte Motor Speedway, and a fast track, a quick track, but one that actually does wear out tires over a long green flag run a little bit more than you would expect, Justin Prince. We saw that a lot in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series event last night. As we zoom into Google Earth and find out where we are, we're about maybe 25-ish, probably closer to 20 minutes actually, just to the northeast of Center City, Charlotte, North Carolina. Right up Interstate 85 is where you'll find Charlotte Motor Speedway. Exit 48, Bruton Smith Boulevard will take you right past Concord Mills, and you turn to your right and follow the slopes up to the Speedway. But tire wear, as I was saying, JP, going to be an interesting factor I think we have to play into tonight.
Yeah, it was a major factor in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series last night. A few drivers, their tires fell off a cliff if they pushed too hard in the first 30, 40 laps of the run. It also became a race filled with strategy. Not going to be the case tonight with it being 60 laps distance. You can make it on a tank of fuel, normally. However, it's going to be important to save that right front tire, because if you get too tight and smack that safer barrier, that'll put you behind the 8 ball the rest of the way.
Really do not want any sort of damage here. This track is quick enough that aero sensitivity will come into play as we get set to bring you the final starting grid of the spring season for the ERL Premier Series. Blake Reynolds for Team Dillon Esports takes the pole with the only lap in the 28, so 28.995 to take top spot over Jimmy Mullis, and then Nick Olson, 2 drivers starting second and third, will be in the championship hunt. Cody McCauley will roll off for the 4th spot. 5th belongs to Jared Darling. Brandon McKissick begins tonight from the 6th spot. Also in the hunt for the title is Alex Bell, who rolls off right next to McKissick in 7th. Landon Huffman, who got it done won the race at Dover, will roll off from 8th. 9th will be the Grand Chieftain himself, Anthony Alfredo, and Ryan Kendrick begins tonight from the 10th position.
Braxton DeWeese starts at 11 tonight with Eric Heater in the 12th position. Zach Novak looks to try and overcome the bad luck he's seen in last evening's race with front engine damage. In 13th is where he'll start tonight. Alexander Kronke in 14th. Todd Smith starts in 15th in one of his first appearances. John Midget in 16th. John Dragonati in 17th position. Alex Chamberlain in the throwback starts in 18th. Greg McCody's the last qualifier, 19th. And coming off a championship in the sportsman's class, Lucas Cram rounds out the top 20.
Colby Wells, RJ Williams, Steve Durham, and Nick Hughes are your final 4 drivers to start in this 24-car grid this evening. And we turn our attention to the track facts here. Charlotte Motor Speedway is home tonight, and it is a 1.5-mile, 2.4-kilometer track that opened in 1960. 24 degrees of banking in the corners here at Charlotte, 5 degrees of banking on the straights. It's deep in the evening on iRacing Day, May 15th, 2020, just after 10 p.m. local time Eastern, and a hot one too. 78 degrees Fahrenheit air temp, 80 degrees Fahrenheit track temp, winds to the southwest at 9 miles an hour, and humidity at 57%. We go tonight for 60 laps, 90 miles this evening for these drivers to tackle, 144 kilometers on tap, 3 attempts at a green, white checker if we need them, and a whole lot of fun coming your way. Final thoughts before we go green flag racing, Justin Prince.
It's going to be fun to see how these drivers shuffle around for the back straightaway today, because on the short runs here normally, we've seen in some cases, if you get a good enough run, lots of back and forths. Lots of drivers having to defend all the way to the blue line to hold on to the clean air up at the front. And maintaining that clean air is going to be vitally important to try and come away with a victory tonight and try and dictate how you want this race to go. In other words, if you can stay up towards the front and defend the bottom, you're in a good situation tonight.
So we got set for 60 laps of racing here at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and we will see who comes out on top in this final fight for the title, the Esports Racing League Premier Series Spring Season Finale, coming from Charlotte Motor Speedway. We go racing in the Queen City to find out who our champion will be. Blake Reynolds takes off at his T. Dillon Esports Coca-Cola Chevrolet Camaro, and we are underway with the final race of the spring season for the ERL. Reynolds got off to a pretty good start, already opening up the lead by about 2 to 3 car lengths. Meanwhile, Nick Olson and Jimmy Mullis already side by side. Jared Darling coming to the inside of the 46, and a lot of momentum for that Ford Mustang as Mullis finds himself trapped up high.
Yeah, and this is going to be rough for Mullis on the short run. It was seen last night at Charlotte. You can carry momentum, yes, out of turn 4 to try and defend, but if you're stuck side by side through much of the track on the middle line, you're likely going backwards like a pendulum bike.
One of those cases where you want to try and get down on the inside, especially if you've got older tires, as Mullis does just that, falls in line behind Nick Olson, now goes to the inside of Nick Olson and is alongside the 24, which is everything that Blake Reynolds wants to see at this point, is the Coca-Cola Energy car, as we've lovingly called it all season long, has gotten underneath the 24 and is trying to take away P2.
Yeah, and this is where the constant battling goes on the short run, especially when you have a fixed setup here at a track such as Charlotte. Look right behind him, though. Cody McCauley's making that middle line work. He's not afraid to use up some of the tire to close up the gap.
Cody McCauley doing a nice job in that 62 machine and not afraid to work the outside lane. You can roll momentum up top and pinch somebody, which is exactly what I think he's trying to do to Jared Darling in that one car. Nice work from McCauley to get ahead of the Ford Mustang and jump up into P4. Meanwhile, Olson back in line behind Jimmy Mullis to try and take away P2. But they're all beginning to catch Blake Reynolds, who was 2/10 slower than Mullis that last time by.
Yeah, but you have to keep an eye on Bell, already in 7th position. That's where he started. If he wants a shot at the championship, he needs to get a move on, and now, whether it's via strategy or whether it's via trying to use up some of their tires on the short run to close up the gap for the long run. But the lead is side by side.
There goes Jimmy Mullis to the inside. The Coca-Cola Energy machine jumps in front of the Coke machine as Nick Olson gets loose on the inside, and everybody jumps to the outside to avoid the 24 that was sideways in the middle of turn 2. Darling to his outside. Now McKissick in the 87. Here comes Alex Bell, Landon Huffman, Braxton Deweese, Zach Novak alongside the 24.
Yeah, got to be nerve-wracking here just a little bit here. Still in that run portion where most drivers are able to go 3/4 throttle, but Olson just has not been able to mesh well in this run. In practice, he snapped loose and collected multiple drivers coming off the pit lane. That car's been dancing and very evil for the 24 off of turn 2 tonight.
Really, really tough. But we now bring in the owner and the founder of the Esports Racing League, Anthony Alfredo. And Anthony, when you've got a car dancing around like Nick Olson's that's so loose, especially in these nighttime conditions where you'd think there'd be a little bit more grip, how do you compensate and alter your driving style to make sure that you don't lose the rear end?
That's a great question, and one of the biggest things is definitely to be smooth on the pedals, both the brake pedal and the gas pedal, modulating the throttle on corner exit. Charlotte Motor Speedway is an extremely rough track, way rougher than it looks. When you look at it, it looks like it's been paved fairly recently. It's nice dark black pavement, but it's very rough in reality. So to be able to get over those bumps without the car stepping out on you or doing something you don't want it to, as far as the balance shifting, you definitely got to be smooth with all your inputs on the pedals, the steering wheel, and I think that's what Nick Olson is figuring out here as he falls in line and kind of settles in.
Also worth noting the driver ahead, Braxton DeWeese in that 8-car, racing with a heavy heart this evening and racing with a special memorial tribute paint scheme to his sister Kendall, who passed away suddenly yesterday, and made a point to us earlier that she was a tremendous fan of balloons and loved them so much. So no surprise then that you see balloons adorning the sides of the number 8 machine as he tries to bring home an ERL championship. Remember, he's one of those 5 that's still mathematically in contention for the title tonight. Not just bring it home for himself, but for his sister and for his family too, JP.
Yeah, indeed. And I know a lot of his family members and friends are cheering him on tonight and seeing how well he can do this evening. It definitely makes it hard to focus behind the wheel, but one thing you have to keep in mind, you want to press on and want to do the best you can in this type of situation.
One of those cases where I was talking to Braxton earlier about the matter, and he said there was no doubt in my mind that Kendall would have wanted me to race, would have wanted me to go on here and be here tonight because she knew how much I loved racing and loved sim racing. So no surprise then that he jumps into the car and starts climbing up the pylon too. We just got Nick Olson, who slid back and back and back further down the pylon, and McKissick is next in line in the 87 machine for DeWeese as he tries to bring it home for everybody. But obviously all of us at Podium Esports and the ERL send our condolences to the DeWeese family in what are undoubtedly very, very difficult times. Up at the front of the field, however, Jimmy Mullish in very good shape and still holding off Blake Reynolds, but not by much in that 3-car. And it makes you wonder, especially I think after the way that Reynolds jumped out front and then got run down by Mullish. Do you wonder if Blake Reynolds might be trying to save tires just a little bit here? You work with him through the TDM side of things a lot, so I figure you've got a little bit better insight as to how he races than most of us.
Absolutely. You know, I'm not too sure here just because they're maintaining very similar pace. I know Coca-Cola is loving this, seeing both their cars out front here at Charlotte Motor Speedway, but during Coca-Cola 600 week, or what would be, so that's exciting for them. But I think Blake is definitely maintaining with Jimmy. He's probably managing his tires a little bit, but he's not letting Jimmy get too far out of his sight so that he can be ready to pounce when the opportunity's right. So I believe that's what we're seeing out of him. But Jimmy Mullis's teammate is also just a few spots back, Zach Novak. He was kind of by himself there for a little bit, but he's reeled in Alex Bell, who's currently tied for the points lead with Jimmy Mullis, looking like he's going to make a pass here to the inside.
So we take a look at Zach Novak, who, like you, Anthony, a fellow Connecticut native, making his presence known towards the front of the field. Of course, Novak, a teammate of Jimmy Mullis's at Richmond Raceway Esports, fueled by Sunoco, and the defending champion of the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. So I have a feeling he knows how to get it done in bits and pieces around Charlotte Motor Speedway, and already he's made a nice charge through the field. Novak started in the 13th spot. He's already up to 6th. So watch that 90 car. Looks like he's got plenty of speed early on in tonight's finale, JP.
Yeah, a lot of speed right now in that race car, and had a lot of bad luck in the race last night where he had contact a couple different times, had to deal with an off-cycle situation where his nose was crushed in, had to come in, peel off tape off his race car, was behind the 8 ball the rest of the night and off strategy the rest of the night as a result. But he's always been fairly quick at this racetrack whenever we've seen him, whether it's been in eFixet or whether it's been in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. He's right now one of the fastest cars on the racetrack. In fact, the only driver inside the top 6 to be in the 32s.
A little bit of contact further back as DeWeese gets into Landon Huffman, and those two bounce off each other coming down the back straightaway. So bumping and banging for 8th and 9th, and a little bit of damage to both of those machines as DeWeese continues to drive it in deep, and Huffman tries to roll the top side once more.
Getting a little bit dicey here, and these cars have been running here side by side a good couple laps here. Might get a little bit frustrating here, but here's the thing too now. Anthony DeWeese now has to deal with damage on the back end. You see it on the right rear.
Absolutely. That was an incredible save by both drivers. He got into Landon Huffman's left rear getting into turn one. Landon held on to it, and then they seemed to bounce off each other, as James pointed out, on the exit of turn two, and they kept rolling there. So great battle right there. Glad they could keep it rolling, but this was a little bit of a flashback to Martinsville last week, it looked like.
Just about, where we saw a lot of bumping banging in Martinsville as Jack Novak has cleared Jared Darling for P4 up towards the front of the field. So the 90 car continues to run. And I have to believe if there's one man that Jimmy Mullis wants to make a charge like that and potentially take the lead away from them, Zach Novak is that guy. Teammates at Lockdown Racing and also teammates in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. And if you want to talk about a brigade that can lock out the title for Mullis and maybe even the race win for Zach Novak, Justin Prince, that duo right there could really shape the way this race pans out if they get together at the front.
Absolutely agree with you. I've talked with both of those drivers a little bit in some cases in preparation for NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series broadcast. They both lean off ideas off one another, give advice to one another, learn from each other for each and every racetrack, put in at least 1,500 to 2,000 laps. So you know they both put in tons of work along with Blake Reynolds for their respective teams to have speed at this racetrack. So it's going to be interesting how they shape things out here because as we've seen, this is a track that leans towards those longer runs where if you're able to save the tires, that leans more in your direction, Anthony.
Absolutely, and this is a 60-lap race. We're only 20 laps into this, so a third of the way through, and a lot of these drivers have ran pretty hard from the start, so if they haven't managed already, it could be too late to save, and that's one of the things you fight in the real-life race car, and iRacing has done a great job with their tire model to replicate that because you can't fire off racing super hard and then ride and save your tires because you've used up so much in the beginning of the run. So you almost have to pick a fast enough pace to not give up too much in the beginning, but to save just enough for later in the run because you don't want to give up so much pace that you give up too many spots on track, obviously. But if you run hard and get away, they're just going to catch you and fly by you towards the end of a long run. And that's the trade-off because you never know when a caution might fly. So obviously it's tempting to get out there and hope you can get tires if a caution comes out. But if you don't and you haven't managed your tires, you're in for a really tough time and you're going to be hanging onto that race car. The more you run, the harder it is going to be to drive.
When the series was at Dover for the NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, one of the drivers explained this to me too, Anthony, where if you push too hard by the first 25 laps, you'd find out if it was too much by lap 40. Does that sound in the right window in your realm, based on real-life experience? Absolutely, and I think you can almost feel from the beginning if you're pushing too hard or not, but the problem is when your adrenaline's pumping and you're so focused, sometimes you don't even realize you're pushing the car harder than you are. And tire saving sounds a lot easier than it really is. Managing the tires is a skill, and you have to develop it through trial and error. Nobody can just do it because it sounds like you just gotta back your corner up or be smoother on the gas, when really what a lot of people tend to do is they back the corner so much to where they don't use any brake in the center because they think that's better. But because they're not on the brake pedal. But when they're not on the brake pedal, they don't realize they're rolling the center of the corner faster, which is actually hurting the right front tire even more or as much as it would if they were just driving as they normally would at a pretty fast pace. So a lot of these drivers are going to have to be careful with that tonight and be conscious that they're not using up too much.
Finding the balance between tire wear and speed. It's one of those things that I think you see, especially here at Charlotte, because you tend to get a lot of long green flag runs. I think we had maybe one yellow in last night's NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series event, but it was a largely green flag race in what was the longest race of the season for those drivers. So green flag management here is really something you have to pay attention to at Charlotte. As here comes Zach Novak to the inside of his teammate, and it's the Richmond Raceway Esports drivers 1 and 2 racing side by side for the lead out of turn 2, Justin Prince.
Yeah, he has been flying throughout this field. Going to be curious how the tires are going to be if this long run goes all the way to the distance. But Novak's made it clear he wants to be in the lead, and his teammate not going to give up without a fight. Here comes the cross.
Brilliant crossover from Jimmy Mullis, who knew that move was coming from Novak going into 3, and then decided to set himself up for it and set himself up for the crossover coming into the front straightaway. And now it's Novak stuck on the top side. He has to worry about Blake Reynolds in that 3 car. And how tricky is that, Anthony, just to make sure that you nail the crossover, especially when you know it's coming? Sounds easy in theory. Actually, it's pretty difficult to execute as we have cars around on the back straightaway, and it's John Midget and Braxton DeWeese, or that are 2 of them. We'll see if there are any more that have been swept up in this, but DeWeese and the 11 in the wall up on the high side of the back stretch to bring out our first yellow of the evening in this ERL Premier Series season finale, Justin Prince.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate for DeWeese. We talked about him in the heavy heart tonight. Now has front end damage, no front clip, in fact, after contact just down the straightaway.
Pretty straightforward thing there, and a tricky one to avoid, Anthony. There's not really much you can do if you get pinched up into the wall and up into the fence. You're just sort of stuck unless you decide to completely back out of it, but then you kill your momentum down the backstretch. So it's almost a double-edged sword that you can't escape.
Absolutely, and there's nowhere to go. You can't move up any higher, and that's the challenge. When you're in that position, you get a wrecked race car, and there was nothing really you could do. There's a wall next to you. You can't move up and give much more room, but that's because these drivers are pushing as hard as they can. It's a championship finale here at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and they want to get the best finish possible in the point standings, because don't forget that the top 5 finishers in points are locked into next season. So it's more than just the championship here for some of these drivers.
And there are a few people that will be seeing their names in ERL competition next year already. We know that I think just about everybody here, given the field size, is good to go. So Bell, Mullis, McKissick, DeWeese, and Olsen should be the 5. It could swap around, and it could be a little bit different, but for the most part, all normal stuff, as Jimmy Mullis wins the battle off of pit road ahead of Blake Reynolds and Zach Novak. But Justin Prince, look who decided to at least roll through their box. Not necessarily certain that Nick Olson's actually going to come down pit road next time or not, but Ian Colby Wells are the first 2 behind the pace car. Mullis wins the battle on pit road, however, ahead of Reynolds, Novak, and McCauley.
Both of them missed the stalls, I believe, here, James, and this is a risky situation if they were to consider staying out, mind you, because it's like you're standing still even with this package on 30-lap difference tires, give or take. So wouldn't be surprised if they came down, but at the same time, you also have to think they will lose a ton of track position if they do come down. It looks like that's what they're going to do. Do the smart call, get fresh tires, sacrifice the track position, yes, but don't risk staying in front of the rest of the pack with 30-lap old tires.
And as they come to begin lap 30, we'll go ahead and take you through our iRacing Midway Race Break, which as always is brought to you by iRacing, the world's leading online competition and racing simulation. Developed from the beginning as a centralized racing and competition service, iRacing organizes, hosts, and officiates races on virtual tracks all around the world. iRacing is home to a wide variety of officially sanctioned series, with racing for the Australian Supercars, IndyCar, IMSA, NASCAR, the World of Outlaws, and more. Jimmy Mullis is your leader for Richmond Raceway Esports, fueled by Sunoco. He has P1 over Blake Reynolds in that Team Dillon Esports Coca-Cola Chevy Camaro. Zach Novak, Mullis' teammate at Richmond Raceway, runs in P3 at the moment. Cody McCauley holds down the 4th position. 5th belongs to Brandon McKissick at the moment. 6th is where you'll find Nick Olson. Jared Darling runs in 7th. 8th belongs to the 15 of Alex Bell. And then Landon Huffman and Eric Heater, Justin Prince round out the top 10.
Ryan Kendrick quietly is in the 11th position right now. Lucas Kram has also quietly gone up +8 positions, has damage, but is in 12th position. Cronke's in 13th. Dragonetti is in 14th spot. RJ Williams is up to 15th spot, with Greg McConey making his way through the incident to get to 16th. Chamberlain in the throwback schemes in 17th. Steve Durham is in 18th, a +5 for him. Nicholas Hughes is in 19th, with Todd Smith in 20th.
Colby Wells, John Midget, and Braxton Deweese running 21st, 22nd, and 23rd to conclude our iRacing Midway race break. With over 170,000 drivers on the service and over 80 laser scan tracks and cars to choose from, iRacing is the original esports racing game. For more information, you can visit iRacing.com today. Before we go green flag racing, we'll take a quick break, but we'll bring you side by side so you won't miss any of the action. You're watching Podium Esports coverage of the Esports Racing League Premier Series season finale from Charlotte Motor Speedway. We return to Charlotte Motor Speedway. Lap 32 is when we'll get the green flag, and we will start working our way towards the end of this ERL Premier Series season, as it's Jimmy Mullis, Blake Reynolds, and Zach Novak at the front of the field, and more importantly, Mullis in control of everything so far as the points go right now. Alex Bell is next in line on the charts in the point standings. He currently runs in 7th. Brandon McKissick running in the 5th spot. Novak only running 6 races, so this is all Mullis needs to see in that sense, but you know he wants the race win too. Pace car comes down pit road, and Mullis takes off. We're back green flag race against Charlotte. Decent start for Zach Novak in that 90 car, the Ginny Dunleavy-inspired Toyota Camry with Sunoco colors, working to the inside of Blake Reynolds as your top 3 all representatives from the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, JP.
Yeah, and they have been setting the pace. They're showing the amount of preparation they had. Drivers have been working since, well, hours after the Dover race for the Coca-Cola 300, which was held last night. So they have a lot of experience, and that you test out how the fixed setup may feel, how that transition to what you want to do for the open set, things such as that. But now contact behind.
One big slide. Is it going to lead to trouble? Everybody backs up. Everybody spins and somehow makes it, and then they finally do spin at the back. Ryan Kendrick involved. John Dragonetti involved. Yellow flag out as the back of the field goes all over the place, and they were bouncing around for a solid portion of turns 1 and 2 in that case, and it was finally a contact, I believe, between, that might have been Ryan Kendrick and the 13 machine, who eventually goes around off of the side of Alex Bell, then gets into John Dragonetti to bring us under yellow. Greg McConey swept up, Todd Smith nowhere to go, and then everybody starts going sideways from there, and Justin Prince.
It started actually just up the road from where the 13 was. Bell made contact door-to-door with McKissick. McKissick got a little bit loose going to the final part of the quad oval. Door-to-door contact. Bell tried to save it on the apron. That's where the 13 came to play, and nowhere else for a lot of these cars to go as they bumped and banged. Good 5+ cars involved, but one of your championship contenders now with the demolished race car.
A big-time smashed-up machine he's got is not the kind of run that he wanted to see, but it's becoming better and better for Jimmy Mullis. And as this race progresses, Anthony Alfredo, if you are in that 46 car, he's been here before. Are you worried about any sort of pressure bits and pieces? Do you change your strategy to try and make sure you're safe and high and dry and home? How do you play this if you're in that 46?
I think you play it patiently aggressive, as we call it. There's a fine line between going 100% aggressive, where you could make a mistake and you're putting too much at risk, but you don't want to run too conservative where you give up too many spots, or maybe you're running conservatively and you fall back and you're kind of in the hornet's nest and end up getting caught up in a wreck. So he's got to be patient here, but patiently aggressive, as we call it, just to try to maintain some track position and keep this points lead all the way to the end, because we're just over halfway through here as we are on lap 35 under caution. So if he can make it to lap 60 and finish up front, but I know Jimmy's not satisfied with just finishing up front. He wants to go out on top and not only win the championship, but win the actual race too. So that's what I'd have to go ahead and guess his mindset is. But as you mentioned before, we have our top 3 are all eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series drivers, which is no surprise from their experience in last night's event. However, we do need to acknowledge that this is a fixed setup race. Every driver is driving the same setup. So the biggest thing comes down to who could manage their tires the best on long run, or just who maybe knows the track the best, or how to manage dirty air as they're in traffic, and all sorts of things like that. So it's not completely the same. There's some similarities to last night, but they're not going to have their custom setups that were tuned to their driving style. They have to figure out how to make this setup go fast. And it seems at this point in the race, the top 3 Coca-Cola iRacing Series drivers have figured it out.
Probably not a surprise that Mullis is up towards the front of this field as well. Of course, Mullis hailing from Midland, North Carolina, which is, maybe what? 15 minutes or up 485 from the speedway. So this is just about quite literally in Jimmy Mullis's backyard that we're racing, and maybe not a shocker then that he's got a really good handle on this place. But then again, he's also probably passed on a few notes to Zach Novak as well. And I think, JP, we can't count out Brandon McKissick, who's just been sitting, waiting, lurking. I wonder if he's going to have something to say about this. And then Landon Huffman too, who's right there in that belly up sports Chevy Camaro. He, I think, also with that partnership with Total Advantage and Dead Zone Racing, have to believe that Huffman's going to play into this, especially after the way he came through at the end of the Dover race to take the victory there.
Yeah, Huffman's getting better and better as this race has gone on so far. We've seen some of the scrapping. Now I think he might be able to try and push on forward here. Keep in mind, you see it just a little bit there. Does have that left side damage just a touch. Don't think it's going to be too much of a factor, though. But you mentioned McKissick specifically as well there, James. That Nexus Esports machine and that entire team has been on full cylinders in the Cup car this season. Regardless if it's been open or fixed, their team has dominated whenever they have gone through the 50% or full distance races on the NASCAR and the iRacing rather open service.
And let's not forget that McKissick not only is only 1 point behind Mullis, but he has his drop in hand. So remember that Mullis and Alex Bell, for that case, have already used their drops, so they don't get to sort of lean back on this. But we could see McKissick pick up a few more points at the end of this. So Mullis can make it easy. If he wins, he's the champion. There's just no question about it, period, end of discussion whatsoever. But if he doesn't win, then this gets interesting, and then you may have to talk about McKissick potentially snatching this away at the last minute, especially if he can find a way to get around the 46. So all sorts of combinations and permutations that I know Anthony Alfredo's looking forward to try and piece together on relatively short notice once this wraps up. Could it take a few breaths before you roll on the beat counter, Anthony?
Absolutely. It's going to be intense here, and it's just great to watch. I never would have expected it to come down to a tiebreaker heading into the final race as far as the point standings go for the lead, and have some others that are close enough to also be in the battle. Obviously, third place is only 1 point off, so it was almost a three-way tie leading into tonight. So this is going to be insane. We have high expectations to see what these drivers can do the rest of it, but let's not count out Blake Reynolds, who's 7th in points, but I'm looking at him for the race win tonight because I think he's just been lurking, and we'll see what happens here as we go green with just over 20 laps to go.
Coming to lap 38 as Reynolds has just been sitting patiently behind Mullis. He let Mullis go to the point, and then it's just been waiting behind that 46. So maybe, just maybe, Blake Reynolds has a little something. He had enough to get around Zach Novak to go to P2. That much we do know. McCauley, though, right behind the 90. They are 3 and 4 wide, a little bit further back, with John Midget to the inside of Nick Olson, who got the victory at Talladega. Lucas Cram is in that mix. Eric Heater also alongside Landon Huffman just a bit further up the racetrack. Justin Prince.
Yeah, everyone's trying to protect that bottom side because, once again, it has been a common thread throughout the night. If you lose the bottom on corner entry, you're likely losing at least one spot, and you burn more tires by running that middle line. Yes, you're able to carry momentum for the defensive line off of 4, but you want to stay glued to the blue line all the way through the corner, and that's why drivers are going so aggressively down to the bottom side, down some of these straightaways, to make sure they stay in that line.
It's not necessarily the same sorts of driving that we've seen of old, but certainly makes sense when you get down to brass tacks and get to it. As Huffman now looks to the inside of Jared Darling a little bit further back, but this is still all Jimmy Mullis in the 46 machine. Here comes Darling trying to fight to the outside of Landon Huffman to try and take over P6.
And just getting clear there, but as you can see, Darling nearly showed exactly what I was talking about. And if you're able to hold on to the right quarter panel just on apex off, you might be able to defend at least the straightaway. But as well, the draft is such a crucial part of things as well with this package here, where if you have the draft in front, it can pull you on forward and set you up for passes. Macaulay's setting up a pass for third, for example.
Macaulay really trying to find his way down to the inside and does that very nicely, very neatly. Gets around Zach Novak in the number 90 machine. Solid pass from the 62 to jump up to P4. McKissick, though, needs a few spots. He needs some help. He's got to find a way to get to and around Jimmy Mullis if he wants any shot at the CRL Premier Series Championship, Anthony Alfredo. And if you are the 87, how hard do you start pushing, especially when you got Landon Huffman to your inside?
You're going to have to run really hard here, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him try and hold him off on the top side here. He's got a little bit of an advantage here coming off of turn 4, so he might be able to maintain his momentum and clear the 75 before turn 1 and get back to protect the bottom. But if not, he's going to have to fight back on the outside, which he might be able to do as we look here, because I've seen Zach Novak and Jimmy Mullis run side by side for the lead for multiple laps, so we know it's possible, and it looks like they're making it work here right now.
Can you explain the concept of pinching to the audience? It's one that we're pretty familiar with here in the booth, but for those who might not necessarily understand what that's all about, you might see an example here between McKissick and Huffman, because he is intentionally running a little bit lower on corner exit than usual.
Absolutely, and what that helps him do is prevent Huffman from utilizing all the racetrack to keep his momentum up and come up the racetrack, because if you pinch the car down, and what I mean by that is have a bunch of wheel in it coming off the corner, the wheel turned to the left too much while you're in the throttle a significant amount, you'll force the car to get tight and plow up towards the wall where you can't really make the car turn anymore, or it'll get loose and get sideways. Both scenarios, not good. You'll probably wreck. One, you'll hit the fence. The other, you'll probably spin out and then maybe hit the fence and collect the guy outside of you. So it's a risky game to pinch someone off. It didn't seem to work right there, but if you give them all that room, they're definitely going to pass you. So in his position racing for the points, he's got to use up all the racetrack he can and try to prevent people from getting by him. And perfect example, he lost 2 spots from that, not just that one. So it was crucial for him to do all he could.
Because Jared Darling was able to get to the inside and McKissick as well. So McKissick now back to 7th, and it just makes life that much easier for Jimmy Mullis. And the only driver really beginning to threaten for pace, I think, Cody McCauley, and then Landon Huffman. Justin Prince, he's a little bit further back of this group, but Huffman has done a very nice job driving back up to P5 at this stage as we work our way towards 14 laps to go.
Curious to see if he gets the opportunity to try and close on in, as long as he gets some good laps, some good pace, might be able to just get within the draft of the 62 and the 90, especially if they continue to try and fight to be able to pull his way on forward. Right now, he's about dead even with that group, for example. Going to need them to go side by side, try and hold each other up, battling into the corner to just get within range to draft his way on up and close that gap up.
Speaking of side by side, we just saw Cody McCauley look to the inside of Zach Novak off of turn 2, but Zach looked like he was able to carry some of his momentum down the straightaway and clear the 62 before they got back to turn 3. But I'm wondering if this 62's been managing his tires a little bit here, and now that we close in on 10 to go, as we're currently on lap 48, maybe he's trying to turn the heat up a little bit and see if he can gain a few more spots.
Not really doing much so far as the stopwatch goes, though. That's the problem. Anthony McCauley was 0.06 of a second slower than Novak that last time by. And as they come across the stripe again, we'll see what timing and scoring says. He was a full 10th slower, so it's fallen off even more for the 62 of McCauley. Meanwhile, good battle between Landon Huffman and Brandon McKissick a little bit further back. And McKissick, interestingly enough, was the fastest car around that last time by Justin Prince. So maybe McKissick's not quite done just yet.
Yeah, you have to remember, though, McKissick's in the midst of the draft as well, and that can get you some extra speed down the straightaways. The difficult part is then getting by said cars in front to carry that speed you just had, and a little bit dicey there going through some of the turf.
was really tight there. You can tell McKissick's got the headlights on. He's got to go. He's got to find a way to get to Jimmy Mullison. He has to make up the 1.7 seconds as Blake Reynolds hits the wall coming out of turn 2, and somehow, some way, sideways down the back straightaway comes and nearly clips Brandon McKissick. Just about lost the rear end of that machine, but that will end Blake Reynolds' opportunity to win this race, I think, as we enter 10 laps to go. Somehow that wasn't a yellow flag. So, Anthony Alfredo, can you take us through how on earth Blake Reynolds just saved that free car?
I have no idea. That was an incredible save, and I think that's just from his experience here on iRacing. Maybe he's been in that situation before, because I don't know how else you could save that car. It seemed he was veering left and right all the way down the back straightaway on the apron. He came back up on the track, but fortunately all the other cars were able to get around him, and it didn't cause a huge wreck as he stays on track here. But he lost a tremendous amount of track position there. Definitely no longer in contention for the win unless we had some sort of late race restart, but even then, too much ground to make up. So it's looking like it's down to the Richmond Raceway Esports teammates Zach Novak and Jimmy Mullis up front in the front of the field, and they've had pretty similar pace, so I'm not sure who's going to come out on top. But either way, Jimmy Mullis is looking to set a tremendous record heading into the following season of the Esports Racing League, our fall season, because right here in the spring season, our inaugural season, he's the only driver to win more than one race, and it's not just 2, it's actually 3, and he's looking to try and make it 4. So that would be a very impressive stat, and as I mentioned, probably a record that could be held for quite some time.
Anthony Alfredo with the count-like numerology there for us on the broadcast as we work towards the final 5 laps, and Zach Novak trying to run down Jimmy Mullis at the stripe. Between those two, Mullis won the battle by 100th of a second, so it is just about dead even between those two. Then McCauley, then McKissick, who somehow, some way, Justin Prince did not get clipped by Reynolds when he lost it a few laps ago. Solid work from McKissick, and looks like he's going to end up a little bit just short, but certainly nothing to sneeze at here if it goes green the rest of the way. He's had a pretty solid season all around.
Yeah, McKissick has a good shot. In fact, if he keeps his head down to try and close up to his highest 3rd, I believe, at this point. But with this battle for the lead, we seen it last time. We got a good long run. We're nearly 30 laps into the overall race. Novak was able to get side by side and try and make a move on Mullis. I think Novak's got the long run pace to try and do it. It might come down to a side by side finish. And it was talked about by Anthony Alfredo a little bit, where these two have driven side by side in this race. Remember, it also happened last night as well, up to 10 laps of side by side if you have a good enough car. Or Anthony.
Absolutely, and Zach has had a phenomenal pace here as he reels in his teammate Jimmy Mullis. It seems as if he's been picking off little bits at a time, but you got to remember, 1/10 of a second at a track like this is equivalent to 1 whole car length. It doesn't sound like much, as that's the average time it takes someone to blink their eye. So 1/10 of a second over the course of these final 5 laps could be just enough for him to have a shot at the win here, as he's closing in more and more each lap.
I almost wonder if this comes down to whether or not Jimmy Mullis decides to be charitable in this case, Justin Prince. We know he's got more wins than anybody else in the CRL Premier Series season, but I don't know, could be feeling nice. Maybe want to get another win to Novak and try and boost him up the point standings a little bit, or let Novak go after it himself and get it done his way, because to his great credit, Zach Novak has found some speed in these final handful of laps.
Mullis is going to hold on to this, I think, as long as he can. And Anthony, I think with your real-world experience, if you're in the same situation, would you do that?
I would definitely do so, and I think what Jimmy has working for him well now is the clean air. Obviously, when Zach Novak closes in on him, it seems like that gap opens up a little bit every time he gets right to his bumper. He's not able to catch him at the right time. When he catches him right in the corner and is right on his bumper, he loses all the downforce on the front of his car, and it affects the handling. The balance shifts greatly, and he's not able to turn the car as well as he could. As we have a caution.
Wow.
Jared Darling in the fence out of turn 4 to set up a green-white checker finish. Contact with the 55 of Eric Heater, and how that changes everything, Justin Prince.
Unbelievable. This is going to make things very intriguing now. Just a bit of a push-up you've seen there from Heater with the contact. And around went the one machine to bring out the caution flag, and now who knows what's about to happen here with just 2 laps to set up things.
I think, I turn to you, Anthony, on this one because it does beg the question, especially given how great Mullis and Novak's cars have been in this deal. When you have something like that happen and your lead is completely wiped out, that gap you built up is completely gone, and now you have to deal with everybody else. How do you maintain your patience, your calm, your cool to make sure that you just don't completely lose it if something goes wrong in this restart?
It's definitely a challenge for sure. The mental aspect of things in racing is something that's underappreciated for sure, overlooked by many. Nobody understands, and that's what's so great about iRacing is when people get on here, they realize how stressful things can be, especially in this situation. This isn't just for the race win, this is for the championship. So Jimmy's gonna have to keep his cool here, as you mentioned. Fortunately, he's still the race leader, so he can get a jump on this restart, hopefully get out front, and he'll only have to lead the green-white checkered to finish this thing off. But we'll have 3 attempts, so if they don't make it this first time, it's not going to be the last attempt. So that's probably what makes it even more stressful, is he's hoping we can just make it to the line right away. And at least he's got some comfort knowing it's his teammate outside of him. He probably won't do anything too crazy, but don't put Zach Novak out of the question as far as going as hard as he can to try to get this race win as well, because he's never won an ERL Premier Series race.
Wild to think when you consider how strong he's been, but such is the case, such is the truth. It is going to be Jimmy Mullis and Zach Novak who will lead this field back to green for what will be green-white checker attempt number 1 of 3. We'll have 2 more to go with this if we don't get it done the first time here, but pretty simple math on this one, Justin Prince. If we make it back to the white flag and the leader takes the white and then we get a yellow, the race is over at that point. If the yellow comes out before they get the white, then we go back around and we go again, as we almost saw Brandon McKissick and company try and duck down pit road for tires.
No, McCauley actually came down in pit. He got tricked into the pit lane.
Well, McCauley got tricked. McKissick stayed out. So interesting play there from the 87 to try and shuffle the board a bit, and it worked out pretty well, I think, if you are a fan of that 87 car, because he will restart 3rd behind Mullis and Novak. And again, we remind you of the championship situation coming into tonight. Alex Bell and Jimmy Mullis were tied on points, but Mullis had the tiebreaker because he's got the most wins in this series, and that won't be touched tonight. Brandon McKissick came into tonight 1 point off of Mullis for the race lead, or not the race lead, the points lead. So if McKissick wins this race, then this gets very interesting, because then it may come down to whether or not Mullis finishes ahead of Novak to determine whether or not he wins the title, Anthony. As we will wait to see how this will shake out at the end, and we will wait to see what madness we shall expect on this restart. We'll remind you, though, that over on the Podium Esports Twitch channel, and for those of you who are watching the ERL Racing Twitch channel, host of the Podium Esports Twitch channel, will be back at the top of the hour for the next round of the Cars Esports Tour from the Lanier Raceplex. Tonight, we go to Georgia for our next round of the season. That'll be at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and then tomorrow night, it's the Icebox Pickup Throwdown from Worldwide Technology Raceway at Gateway, as the stars of the NASCAR Gander RV and Outdoors Truck Series, including one Anthony Alfredo himself, will be taking part in action down at Gateway and have raced in that series in past weeks. Then Friday, it's the Subaru Rallycross All-Star Invitational presented by Yokohama from Hell. The season finale there at 6 p.m. Eastern on Friday, before we have a twofer on Saturday. It's a virtual Formula Drift from Road Atlanta at 3 p.m. on the Podium Esports Twitch channel, and the International Sim Racing Challenge. The best drivers from the Porsche Club of America and the Porsche Club of Great Britain will take to it in a 2-part series that begins on Saturday from Silverstone, and you can see that on the iRacing Esports Network at 4 p.m. Eastern on Saturday afternoon. And of course, for more information on Podium Esports, you can head to podiumesports.com. For more information on the ERL, slide on over to the ERL Twitter feed at ERL Racing, or the Esports Racing League on Facebook, Instagram also there as well for all your esports racing league needs, as we turn our attention to the restart to come. This our first green-white checker attempt of the evening. Jimmy Mullis and Zach Novak start side by side. Brandon McKissick is in there too. And Landon Huffman, who has not had much of a sniff of the lead, but he's had pace, he's had speed. He could well be a factor in how this pans out. But it is all on Jimmy Mullis to nail this restart and potentially drive away with the ERL Premier Series title for the spring of 2020 and take home the inaugural crown in the top division of ERL competition as we go back green flag racing. And it was a pretty solid restart from Mullis. Novak will be able to duck in behind if he so chooses. He drops in front of McKissick. Nick Olson going through the grass to try and make sure they don't run into trouble as they're 3 wide a little bit further back and maybe 4 wide almost here through 1 and 2.
They're still 3 wide coming off the corner. Cars are sliding, they're wrecking
all over the place, and they come back into the racetrack, and we will have green-white checker number 2, and I had a hunch that probably wasn't going to work, JP. It was one of those cases where everybody was fighting for positions, and it just went all crazy right from the start. Nick Olson got a great run on Blake Reynolds coming through the quad oval, got down to the inside, ended up on the apron, and then once he got down on the apron and everybody got back up, it was almost 4 wide in the middle of the corner between the 24, the 3, Braxton DeWeese in the 8, Alex Bell in the 15, and John Dragonetti in the 14. Dragonetti got down on the inside and lost control, as did DeWeese, who clipped the fence on the top side and clipped Eric Eater. As a result, they all go around on the back straightaway, and that is why we are under the yellow flag once again.
Yeah, that wasn't going to work the second that Olsen went off in the grass in that final part of the quad oval. Just was not going to work, especially with cars having to go 3, 4 wide, sliding around in that section. Just not a smart situation overall. Olsen isn't overall the cause, but the lead up with that move just turned the intensity knob, it seemed, Anthony, all the way up to 10.
Yeah, absolutely. This is not what Jimmy Mullis wanted to see, as you mentioned before. And I'm honestly kind of excited for this next restart because Zach Novak had just looked to the inside of Jimmy going down the back straightaway when that caution flag had flown. So it could be a battle of the Richmond Raceway Esports drivers here. And don't forget, McKissick's in third, as you guys had mentioned. So this could be a very, very interesting battle for the points lead, with McKissick restarting third on the bottom lane. He's going to be able to follow Jimmy. If he gets a good enough restart and fires right when Jimmy does, he might be able to follow him up through there, and before they build all that momentum up and Jimmy could utilize the clean air and kind of block the dirty air. As I was mentioning before, Zach was fighting. He would catch Jimmy right in the center of the corner, and he'd lose the front end and have a hard time turning, and Jimmy would gap him again. But if he could catch him somewhere on corner exit coming down the straightaway and then make the move to the inside and be able to race side by side from there, it'll be a good battle. So it looks like Zach Novak might be able to have a hard charge here, and maybe Brandon McKissick have a shot at the championship if he's able to get to Jimmy's inside and if something drastic happens here.
That's the key in all this, is that we know the story with Mullis, we know the story with Novak, but McKissick could make for some heavy calculator crunching if he can pull something off here at the very end of this, Justin Prince. He's, I think, really the last one with a realistic chance to try and make this happen at the front of the field so far as the title goes. Though we also can't rule out Landon Huffman and even Nick Olson, who got a great restart and jumped up ahead of Blake Reynolds. All 3 of those drivers have the ability to challenge Mullis and Novak if they nail this restart.
Yeah, I think Olsen made it clear that he felt like he's got places to be in. He wants to be up at the front with the freshest tires in the field. Don't forget as well, Bell, we talked about him being involved in one of the incidents, was tied with the drops factored in entering tonight. He's up to 6th position. If anything happens amongst some of those front runners, there's a good chance Bell can come back forward and steal things depending on how things shuffle out here at the front 2, 3, 4 spots.
And especially if Novak and Mullis somehow, some way get together, then it really opens up everything and really changes the game on this. And then it could be a complete and total free-for-all towards the front of the field. We're not necessarily certain how it will pan out at the end, but I would say don't go anywhere if you're here now, because we're going to have a very entertaining green-white checker finish to wrap up this spring season for the Esports Racing League, as we say hello to all of you watching watching on the ERL Racing Twitch channel at ERL_racing, and then the Podium Esports Twitch channel as well. 2 points of entry for tonight's broadcast of the Esports Racing League season finale from Charlotte Motor Speedway, and we are, of course, glad you're along with us for the ride. And now, just sort of waiting, wondering, maybe wishing if you're Brandon McKissick, maybe wishing if you're Jimmy Mullis, hoping that nothing crazy happens behind you. And now we will see where exactly things will pan out in the end. Also, interesting commentary in chat from Nick Olson and Zach Novak. He said, and I quote, "I wasn't letting him kill my momentum from the wreck under yellow. I got places to go," alien face. So I'd say that certainly confirms what Justin Prince said, Anthony Alfredo, about Olsen wanting to make sure he got to the front at the end of this.
Absolutely, and he's top 5 in points. He wants a guaranteed starting position in next season, and not to mention the fact he's our Talladega Superspeedway winner. So he knows he can win in this series against some of the best iRacers and these professionals from the Coca-Cola iRacing series. So he's going to race hard here because he knows he belongs and is a threat to win these races. So he's got a great shot at it here with this green-white checker. This is our second of 3 attempts. We'll see if we can make it to the checkered flag this time, but it's going to be an intense battle, and Jimmy Mullis has got to keep himself calm here, and he's going to have to stay mentally focused. I'm sure if he gets a good jump like before, he'll be able to hopefully stretch it out a little bit in his case, but obviously, there's a really great chance at an awesome finish here with Huffman also restarting 4th behind Zach Novak. Who knows, might be able to run side by side for a few laps or maybe even see some 4 wide like we did last time.
Also of note, Nick Olson on completely fresh tires. And let's remind you that in the Podium Esports Elite Series Gold Division season finale last July at Atlanta Motor Speedway, it was Andrew Fayos who used the same strategy to leapfrog Michael Guest and Daniel Falkingham to win the title, even though he didn't necessarily have the best car all night. Might be something we need to watch out for if Novak finds a way to hold up Mullis, but it is instead McKissick who misses the restart, and it is Olsen who is stacked up on the inside as we go green with 2 laps to go. He's going to try and shove the 87 through the corner, but Olsen's going to have to find a way to make things happen. Here comes Zach Novak to the outside to try and find the race lead, JP.
And it looks like one more car in the inside wall. Steve Durham slamming the wall hard. Caution's out.
Yellow flag is out for Steve Durham, and it will be one more green-white checker attempt. And maybe more importantly here, if this shakes out the way I think it may well just, Nick Olson was able to clear Landon Huffman, and now he will restart directly behind Zach Novak with that momentum on the outside and all that room to work with. If you are the 24 machine, Anthony Alfredo, I think you'd be crazy to say that you don't love the position that you're in if you're the 24. I think you absolutely are just losing your mind with happiness, given how much McKissick really missed the restart there that last time by.
Absolutely. That was the last thing McKissick needed on that restart. It looked like he gained some of the ground back by the time they got to the middle of the back straightaway, fortunately, but I think that's because he had that huge push from the 24 who had fresh tires, and it's going to be interesting to go through this once again here because the 24 was looking 3 wide going into turn 1 on that start because he had a great restart when the 87 did not. So I know he knows he's got plenty of speed in that race car due to those tires, and that's going to give him a shot at it here on this final green-white checkered restart attempt. But don't put it past him or the 87 to maybe get a little bit aggressive here just because of the top 5 in point standings qualifying for next season, and of course even having a shot at the championship potentially if something drastic were to happen, as I had mentioned before.
It could be wild. It could be crazy. You can't rule out that 24 car, given that he has played the pit strategy just about perfectly at the end of this. It is something you cannot underscore enough. Also, I love this interchange. Justin trying to make sure that everybody's all looped in and in good shape. And Zach Novak comes back and he says, nah, we vibing. Nah, we vibing good. We vibing good. So, yeah, I was going to say, I think Novak's ready to go and try and get this victory, JP.
Apparently Olsen's in the same boat that they're both vibing. It's a good thing that they're both loosened up, to say the very least, for what could be a crazy finish to the end of the season. It could go to anybody. based on what we've seen. Novak had a good run down the back stretch. There's a chance we see him poke his way past Mullis if there is a chance. Olsen, he made it clear he's got places to be. We'll have to see which place he ends up going to by the checker flag. In other words, that vibing's going to turn into having to hold on white knuckles onto the steering wheel in just about a couple minutes.
White knuckles might be an understatement for that 24 machine, who at this point is more of a spoiler so far as the points go. I think that's the other big thing to note. He's 11 points back, and if Mullis and Novak and McKissick can at least hang in the top 5, Olsen will not catch him. It will lock down his place into next season's ERL competition. But at this point, if you're the 24, you're racing for the win. Same sort of deal that Zach Novak is running for, and same sort of deal that I think everybody here wants to see at the front. You'll at least have 3 of the 4 that are going to go for the victory. And then if you're McKissick, Anthony Alfredo, are you playing points? Are you playing victory? Are you trying to find a balance? Are you just completely hamstrung? What are you doing, and where's your head at if you are the 87 car?
He's got to go full send for the points here, just knowing the fact that he needs to winning this race would be his best shot at it, honestly, and especially with the drop week, he needs to put himself in contention by getting up front, because being behind the 46 isn't going to do him any good as far as getting a championship. He can still finish well in the points, but if he wants a shot at it, he's really going to have to go for the win here and be aggressive. Fortunately, he gets his second shot at a better restart here, because his last one was not too great. So if he can make up for that and be on Jimmy Mullis's bumper, maybe push him through 1 and 2, help him get some speed up so they could clear the 90 of Zach Novak, then he could make his move. But I don't want to rule out Zach Novak fully yet, even though he's not on as fresh of tires as the 24, and the 24 is a lot more grip, and he's going to be rolling here on this restart. The 90 seems to have almost secretly saved some tires the last couple runs, because he wasn't too far back or too far off pace, but he seems to be a challenge at the end of these runs. So I'm sure he probably has a little bit more left than the 46 with how many laps they've run on these tires. As we saw both green-white checkered attempts so far, he's been on Jimmy's bumper going down the back straightaway, if not looking to make a move for the win. So I'm curious to see what he does here, because if the 2 of them can get away like they did last time, maybe break away far enough where the 24 can't catch him on fresh tires, Jimmy and Zach Novak can have a battle for the win. But the way Zach picked through this field at such a ferocious rate on the long run makes me think he still has some tires left compared to some of the competition other than the 24.
Valid points all around, and this is where I think you really earn your money, even if it's not necessarily in the NASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series competition. If you're the 46 and the 90, these are the types of situations that Brandon Brown, Zach Curtis, Dennis Bickmeyer, and all of the team at Richmond Raceway live for. This is the sort of thing that they look for out of the drivers who race for Richmond Raceway Esports. So these two, maybe with a little bit of responsibility on their shoulders to come through. And hello to Brandon Brown and Zach Curtis and company watching. I know they're keeping an eye on this, as they may well have a championship to celebrate in the ERL competition in the next 2 laps or so. If Mullis wins this, it is not a question. He is the champion, period, end of discussion. If anybody else wins, we're going to the beans to count it, as we have one more attempt for the green-white checkered, and Mullis gets away, and McKissick spins the tires a little bit again, but this time Zach Novak gets away from Nick Olsen, who also didn't get the greatest of restarts, and it may well just be the 46 and the 90 like Anthony talked about, Justin Prince.
They timed that startup perfectly. Here comes the run now with the chance down the back straightaway. Novak last time elected not to poke. Electing to be patient this time again as they still shuffle for third.
Everybody fighting for P3, and Novak now running on the top side. Here comes Alex Bell in the 15. He's coming hard with fresh tires, and Novak now with the big block on Bell as they come to white flag. Cars fanning out 3-4 wide. McKissick in the fence through the quad oval. No yellow flag yet. We stay green flag racing, and here comes Bell to the outside. He's going to get around Novak, and it's going to be on Mullis to try and make the block.
If he can get to Mullis, he might be able to come away with the championship here. Remember, they were tied entering tonight.
Somehow, some way, big momentum, big send from Alex Bell, big run on the outside. Mullis isn't going to be able to do anything. He bounces off the 15, and the 15 hits the fence. Jimmy Mullis with the side panel makes it work and survives the end of the ERL Premier Series spring season to claim the victory, and it was just enough as they all tear themselves to pieces behind Jimmy Mullis. But I do believe unofficially that is Mullis's race, that is Mullis's title, and you saw exactly what happened there. We mentioned the teamwork between the Richmond Raceway Esports drivers. Novak, within about a half a lap, Anthony Alfredo immediately started playing defense to make sure that no one could get to the 46.
Absolutely. That was an incredible finish. I cannot believe what we just witnessed. I did not expect that. Coming to the white flag, the 15 came out of nowhere on fresh tires. After that incident early in the race, we thought he was out of contention, and here he comes racing for the tiebreaker off of turn 4. He was so close. That would have been insane. It still was. Honestly, I couldn't believe he even made up that much track position on that green-white checkered finish. It seemed if he hadn't got stalled out on the top there, I'm not sure if they were playing teammates there as Zach Novak ran the top and kind of blocked him there, and the 87 of Brandon McKissick was able to stay inside the 15. If that hadn't happened, there was no doubt the 15 was going to get to the 46 even earlier and maybe have a shot at the win, but being on the outside wasn't ideal coming off of turn 4. They just got into each other's doors, racing for the win and ultimately a championship, and Jimmy Mullis was able to come out on top.